Listen to Montel across America. All my friends, listen to Montel across America. And so should you. You should get all your friends to do the same. I'm Montel Williams, host of Montel Across America, and thank you so much for being part of the conversation today. Of course, you can be a part of this conversation at any time by calling in at 866-303-2270, 866-303-2270. Plenty going on in Iran. Iran's Revolutionary Guard again vowed to put an end to the chaos of the streets. The number of protesters has fallen from hundreds of thousands to just hundreds as security forces pound them with water cannons, tear gas, clubs to disperse the crowds. As demonstrations subside, the opposition, which has some support among the ruling clerical elite, looks set to pursue efforts to oust Ahmadinejad by lobbying with the establishment, and that seems like that may not go anywhere, and the saboteurs the Revolutionary Guard say the saboteurs must stop their actions or face decisive and revolutionary action. Shortly following this media announcement, police used tear gas, fired shots into the air yesterday to break up crowds of protesters in Tehran's square, and spokesman for the Guardian Council told state-run Press TV, no major fraud or breaches happened in the election, so all these protests are for naught because the results will not be annulled. And it also appears that Iran's press reports that the police officers in Tehran have raided the campaign office of opposition leader Mir Hussein Mousavi and declared it was the headquarters for psychological war against the country's security. And Mousavi's wife has just released a statement asking for the immediate release of all protesters. To help us understand some of this that's going on, please welcome Senior Vice President at the Center for American Progress, Mr. David Halperin. David, thank you so much, Director and Senior Vice President. David, I'm telling you, it's heating up in multiple ways. It's heating up over there in Iran, even though the numbers of protesters has been squashed a little bit. I think the rhetoric is still heating up from within, and it's heating up here. What do you think?
Well, first thing I want to say, Montel, is I'm glad to be back on your show. It is an outrage what's going on in Iran. The regime there is suppressing democracy, suppressing freedom, suppressing tolerance, suppressing women's rights, and we all ought to be clear about that. There ought to be universal values. This isn't just a situation where we can say, oh, every country has different values. The people in Iran have made it clear, a large number of people, that they want something different. They want a different system there, and we ought to be applauding that, and we ought to be standing up and saying these people are in the right, and we stand with them.
And that's the first one. So do you think that the president has made a strong enough statement when he said that, we're appalled and we're outraged? Listen to this.
The United States and the international community have been appalled and outraged by the threats, the beatings, and imprisonments of the last few days. I strongly condemn these unjust actions, and I join with the American people in mourning each and every innocent life that is lost. I've made it clear that the United States respects the sovereignty of the Islamic Republic of Iran and is not interfering with Iran's affairs. But we must also bear witness to the courage and the dignity of the Iranian people and to a remarkable opening within Iranian society. And we deplore the violence against innocent civilians anywhere that it takes place.
As a former speechwriter for both Bill Clinton and Howard Dean, do you not, number one, think that that was a pretty incredible speech that he gave before the press conference, in a sense, in informing and using the words precisely to get the message across? They're saying, we're outraged, this must stop, we're on the side of human rights, we're on the side of basic rights of being able to assemble, being able to voice your protests. What did you think of the president's speech yesterday?
I thought it was dead on exactly right, and I agree with your last guest and many other people who say the president is striking the right tone. He's standing up for the right values, but he's not saying to the Iranian people, rise up, we'll come there and help you out, because it's clear we can't fight three wars. We can't go do house-to-house fighting in Iran. There are still many supporters of the regime. The regime has the guns there, and we don't want to be put in a situation where, A, the regime can paint the uprising as a puppet of the United States, and B, where the people in the uprising think that someone's going to come to their rescue, because someone is not.
And we also don't want to make those people who think that someone's coming to one side's rescue think that here comes the Americans again trying to dictate what goes on inside of our sovereign territory. Right?
Exactly, because the Iranian people are speaking for themselves and standing up for themselves. They don't need us to back them up in the sense of saying, now we're going to tell you how to have a system. They know what the right thing to do is. But they're outgunned, and it's going to be bloody. And if you look at struggles across the world in the last 50 years, the last 2,000 years, regimes don't give up voluntarily. Sometimes you have something that looks like a peaceful change, like in the former Soviet Union, but then it's followed by years of upheaval and bloodshed and violence. These things are not pretty, and they're not clean.
And this is something that we definitely should not have our hands on the bloodshed with. But, yesterday, current Senator McCain, former presidential candidate McCain, was asked a question, and this question specifically, between Ahmadinejad and the reformers, do you think there's any doubt what side President Obama is on? And McCain answered by saying, I know what side I'm on. I'm on the side of the people. I'm not on Ahmadinejad's side or Mousavi. I'm on the side of the Iranian people, and I'm on the side of history. I'm not going to walk on the other side of the street while people are being killed and beaten in the streets of Iran, as if to say that the president is in some way, shape, or form in cahoots with those who are doing the beating. Do you think the rhetoric like this does us any good, especially since this will be printed on the papers over in Iran?
I think senators can bluster a little bit. That's part of their job. That's the kind of thing that they do. And John McCain seems like he's always for intervention. I don't know what he would have done if he'd been president. He said President Clinton should go in on the side, to try to fight to help the Bosnians in the conflict over there in the former Yugoslavia. He's always, it seems to me, for going in. And we'd have 9 wars if he were president. I mean, we'd like to get rid of North Korea. There's all kinds of governments we'd like to get rid of. We just don't physically have the power to go in and change every government by force that we want to change. And I do think it's wrong for him to imply that the president's on the wrong side of this. But I don't think it's that harmful to have a few people. There's always someone speaking up in some parliament somewhere who's sort of the crazy person. You can play
Got to take a little break. Got to take a little break. I'm going to be back. Please stick around. Listen to Montel Across America.
Montel Williams.
22 years in the armed forces.
Retired a lieutenant commander.
On television for 17 years.
Over 3,000 shows.
33,000 interviews.
A best-selling author.
Activist.
Emmy Award winner.
And now the best part.
He's on your radio.
Welcome to Montel Across America.
What is hip? It's Montel Across America. Montel Across America. I'm your host, Montel Williams. Thank you so much for tuning in today, Wednesday, June 24th, episode number 57 for Montel Across America. What is hip? You know it's Montel Across America, and if you want to be a part of this conversation, all you got to do is you can call me at 866-303-2270, or you email me your views at montel@airamerica.com and tell me what you think. We're covering the hot issues and the headlines, and today's issue in Spotlight has been Iran, though we'll be covering some other things that are coming up in the news throughout the day. I'm really, really, really happy, but we've got some really unbelievable guests that have been on the line and are prepared to be a part of this conversation. But I got to make an announcement. This is really kind of cool. I don't know. I've talked to you about this multiple times, and sometimes I feel like I'm a broken record, but I've only been on the air for 57 days, so I need to do a lot more because I think a lot of people don't really know a lot about my background. So real quick, well, a lot of people said to me, you hear people call and say, Montel, thank you for your service. And I did 2 branches of service. I was in the military for 22 years. Started out enlisted in the Marine Corps. I went through Parris Island, South Carolina, back in the old school Marine Corps. And went from achieving the rank of corporal. I got meritorious promoted 3 times, but could have put on sergeant, but opted not to because I got selected to go to the Naval Academy. And at the Naval Academy, I went through the prep school and then went through the Naval Academy itself in Annapolis, Maryland. And while there, I was in what was called back then 15th Company. And I went through, again, I like to say old school for all those Naval Academy listeners, because there was a time when you went through the academy, you basically picked a roommate or 2 roommates if you ended up in a 3-man room. And you had those roommates for all 4 years. Now, they've changed that because they make them, shift around and move around. You can't have the same roommate. But back in my day, I roomed with 2 guys, Augie Flack and Wycliffe Paul. And one of our classmates in the same company with me was James Houck. And I've just found out from another classmate, Augie. So thanks a lot, Augie, for give me the insight. But the Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, announced on June 23rd that the president has made the following nominations. Navy Rear Admiral James W. Halk has been nominated for the appointment to the rank of Vice Admiral and assignment as Judge Advocate General of the Navy in Washington, D.C. So that's 15th Company rules. We rock. It's another one of those 50 company guys that made it to the top. You know, I don't know if I'm at the top yet, but I kind of think I made it a little bit. Halk is currently serving as Deputy Judge Advocate General of the Navy and Naval Legal Services Command in Washington, D.C., but he gets ready to take over the whole thing. So go ahead with your bad self. That's a classmate from the Naval Academy class of 1980. And I know it's shameless, but I'll plug my boys whenever I get a chance. And a lot has been going on. We're going to talk about the headlines and hot issues. A lot's going on, especially when it comes to Iran. The president yesterday said that, you know, we live in a time around when no iron fist is strong enough to subdue the will of the people.
This is not about the United States or the West. This is about the people of Iran and the future that they, and only they, will choose. The Iranian people can speak for themselves. That's precisely what's happened in the last few days. In 2009, no iron fist is strong enough to shut off the world from bearing witness to peaceful protests of justice.
And he also went on to say that governments should lead by consent, not coercion.
Those who stand up for justice are always on the right side of history. As I said in Cairo, suppressing ideas never succeeds in making them go away. The Iranian people have a universal right to assembly and free speech. If the Iranian government seeks the respect of the international community, it must respect those rights and heed the will of its own people. It must govern through consent and not coercion. That's what Iran's own people are calling for, and the Iranian people will ultimately judge the actions of their own government.
But as we speak, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has stated unequivocally that the saboteurs must stop their actions or face decisive revolutionary action. They've already said that they are going to put an end to the chaos of the street protest, and it appears that their efforts are working because the numbers have dropped from hundreds of thousands down to hundreds who are willing to venture out in the street to voice their opinion because they're being met with water cannons, tear gas, and clubs to help disperse the crowds and help us understand what's going on and whether or not this is going to come to an end or where it's going to head. Please welcome the Director and Senior Vice President at the Center for American Progress, Mr. David Halperin. David, thanks a lot for sticking around for us, but let's talk a little bit about this. You know, the President came out swinging yesterday, in a sense, and when I say swinging, but those are some of the toughest words that he's been attributed to, or that have been attributed to him so far. And if you listen to what he said since the election itself, he has been pretty consistent in tone, though he did ratchet it up a little bit yesterday. And but there are those who don't think that he's being strong enough. And I got to ask you, what do you think about those who think I don't understand what they want him to do. We can't put troops on the streets of Iran. The Iranian people won't accept that. So I think he's really right on point.
I'm with you, and there's not much more to say about that. I think you wonder the motives of the critics. Are they just trying to, get attention for themselves? Are they just feeling morally that they can't hold back? But I think the president, if the moral thing is to stand with these people and hope that and do everything we can to help them succeed, I think the president is in the right place, because what we can't do is take our National Guard folks that just came home and say, okay, one more time, let's put 30,000 people in Iran because that'll be enough to change the balance. Nothing like that will work. We've got to, unfortunately, more people are going to die, and it's going to be suppressed, and it's going to take time. But ultimately, the struggle we've seen in the last 100 years is a struggle where freedom continues to make progress, but people do suffer along the way.
I had a guest on just recently in the last hour. Her name was Paris, and Paris is from Iran. She was here in the United States, and she was speaking out because she's talking to her relatives that are there on the street, and you asked the question, will it make a difference whether or not it's Ahmadinejad or Mousavi? And she's clearly over and over and over again reiterated to us that I think America's attentions are on the wrong topic, in a sense. The topic should be the Ayatollah Khomeini and all of the mullah that run the country, and not so much on this, puppet, with the hand in the back, a person like either Mousavi or Ahmadinejad. What do you think about that?
Khamenei and his folks there
Khamenei.
run that country. But the question is whether another leader, if it could be Mousavi or someone else, could be someone who could start to build independent power base and start to erode the power of Khamenei and work internationally, work with other countries in a way that starts to build more legitimacy for a real democracy movement in Iran. So I think in the end the idea of encouraging others, because Ahmadinejad, he's Khamenei man all the way, and that's where we'll be in the weakest position, and the people in Iran who support democracy will be in the weakest position.
And there seems to be now a little bit of a split forming in the echelon. You know, I know there are two different groups of clerics. There's one group of clerics that are directly in line with the supreme leader, and there's the Gang of 86, who are the other guys who actually elected him. You know, this little split, is this giving, you know, the people who are against the establishment, giving them just a little bit of a foothold, or no?
Maybe, but the main thing is that people, that the leaders ultimately understand that at some point leaders listen or they lose their heads, literally. So whatever way you can play these factions, they need to believe that enough people in Iran are tired of the intolerance, the lack of democracy, the lack of freedom, the support overseas for bad things like terrorism in other countries. They need to feel that pressure. And unfortunately, the people don't have the guns. The regime has the guns, and violence will continue to be the most powerful currency there. But as people stand up, as people are brave, and as now the world becomes more open and people see what's going on inside Iran because of all the new ways people can communicate, and people outside can see more ways in, and then I think things will change, and openness and solidarity among people who support democracy will make a difference eventually.